Hi guys, welcome back to chapter 24. This is the unofficial end of the creating the image part of the class. And here we will take all that we did and compile it in Photoshop to produce the final images for our scene. So this is the render, but how do we begin the Photoshop? Where do we start? We need to know what we want to change in the raw render in order to know what to start. After that, we will analyze the image to see whether this needs, changes in the composition or that the lighting is being expressed clearly in the form of contrast, whether the atmosphere is right, and whether this has enough details that we want viewers to see. And if there are too much details, we want to tone it down. And also, if there are obvious mistakes, we want to be able to re-render some of the parts of the shot. Okay, so without further ado, let us begin. So this is the first image, and we have to see what we want to change this. So for the first image, we are looking at the PNG because this is the best representation of our viewport. So right now, if we zoom out a little, it's easier to see an image when it's zoomed out. We get to see the whole entire scene as a whole, and that the first thing that comes to me is that the contrast is not high enough to fully represent the composition lines. And there's a lack of detail on the prop and wall textures, such as the grunge that's running down the walls and some of the textures, as well as the electricity pole and the ground here. It looks relatively flat. It lacks a sense of shadow and light that makes the column here look rounded, and here it just looks like it's one flat surface. So and also for the character, we're lacking some details here. If you zoom in, we're looking at the skirt and it's missing some details as well as part of the leg. So what we want to do is to start off with the EXR file, because for this render we saved both an EXR and a PNG file. So first we will open the EXR file. And as we noted in the last chapter, that the EXR file actually does really well in the darker places. It has more information than PNG. So we're going to be using this to add in a lot of details that is not currently available in our PNG format. So with this, we'll first go here and change the mode to 16 bits so we can make it to work. Now with this, there are a lot of options here. You can change the strength of your details already here, but we're going to leave everything as is. So just going to click OK. Now you'll see a lot more details in here than compared to this, but the lighting and the shadows are raw. So we're going to go here and add in a curve and try to mimic what we have. So I'm going to close that PNG and then open up the PNG inside this file so we can have a direct overlay of what we're looking at. So with this, I'm going to be moving this down so it has that shadow that the PNG has, and then a little of a light. So there's the contrast about like that, I think. Oh, a little darker. So like that. And now everything is oversaturated. So we just add in a saturation and just like dial down the saturation here. So now we have more or less a similar scene as our PNG. But if you notice, the PNG is looking really muddy and white. And there's lack of details, whereas if we turn this off, we have really nice details on the wall, on the texture, on the electricity pole. So this is why EXR is a much better format. Okay, so now with the two almost similar, we can go here and just fine-tune some adjustments. For example, the magenta I think is still a little too too saturated, so we can pull that off, pull that down. And the red as well, just a little bit. Okay, so with that done, we can now, add a curve to lighten up our composition lines. So we can pull back a little so we can see more clearly. And with this, we'll take the third one from the top, and then let's go and try to eyedrop a part of the scene that is somewhat light, because what this eyedropper does is wherever it eyedrops, that will become the new highest exposure zone for your entire scene. And as a result, the whole entire scene lights up, and everything else that was brighter would become overexposed. So then we're just picking for a place that is relatively, like, I think this is pretty nice. Okay, so we have this, but we can't use this, so we'll be using a mask because we only want to use a portion of this. So first, let's just paint the mask black. So then we can start painting in the parts that we want lit up. So now let's pick one that's maybe this big, and with 5% flow we can start painting in, right, we have to paint it as white, sorry. So now we can start painting in the light. And for the ground, we can paint in this part a little more brighter because it's directly underneath the street lamp. Whereas this part, we can just paint it a little bit because it's darker, and this part more because it's near to the source of the light, so it's usually a little brighter. So then we have this brightness, a little dark, and more bright. And same thing here. We want to paint in a little bit of the light here, maybe not too much, but just a little bit on the ground, so we do get some highlights around this area as well. Okay, so now if we turn just a little, turn this on and off, we can see that, okay, so our light has more contrast, and we can see that there's a more clear definition of the light hitting this way and hitting this way, forming the lines that centers on our claw machine here. And we can also just make this a little smaller, and then just paint in a little bit of our claw machine here, so that we can see the border just a little more fine, as well as a bit on the ground, so that our reflections are more noticeable. And we select the other curve because we made this darker, and there are parts that we want light. We can also use a mask and paint in a little bit of a mask so that this part is a little lighter. So the skirt is lighter. Whoops. So now our skirt is lighter, and then we can also just paint in a little bit of the leg, so it has more definition. We can even make the brush a little smaller, so we paint in a bit of the highlight from the yellow light. Oh, yeah, just a little bit. So now if we press shift and left click, you can see that this part now has more definition. And we can also, just paint in a little bit of inside the claw machine, because right now the character inside is really bright, actually should be, because all the lights are hitting her, and that her exposure should be a little bit higher as well. So we can just paint in a bit of the claw machine. Okay, that's looking good. And just maybe tone it a little bit down. Okay, so now we have this that's being lit up, and we have our light. Next, let's add some shadows to make this part a little darker, because right now it's still really light, and we can darken up some of the street so we have more dimension on the streets. Okay, so let's go again to the curves, and now let's select this one this time, and it does the opposite, where your eyedrop will become the new black part, the darkest part of this image. So now if we select here, now this becomes the darkest part and everything else becomes dark as well. So now we're selecting a part that's just slightly, where we want to make this part darker, just a little darker. So we eyedrop this, so then our AC is barely visible, but we do see the nice definition of the squares and the little details here. Okay, and now let's paint this black. So first we hide all the effect under the mask, and now just turn on this, and then we can, and just slightly paint in the shadow. So you want this part to be more shadow. And we want this part to be a little more shadow. The back over there, as well as these guys. So just paint over where you think there should be some shadow. And I think maybe a little on the box here too, so that there's more contrast, as well as on the garbage cans and the back here. And I'm going to paint in a little bit here on the streets, so we have more contrast between the dark and the light. Okay, so let's turn on and off, and you can see that there is more shadow and thus more contrast in the scene. Great. And lastly, let's add a color balance. And for the color balance, you can just go with it, because here is where you really can change the mood of your render. For example, if you really want to go for the matrix look, you can make it like really green, a little bit of cyan, and then yellowish, so you get that really matrix green look. But for me, I think I'm gonna make the shadow part a little cyan, a little blue, because it does reflect a bit of the sky or the surrounding, which is mostly blue light. And for the highlights, it's coming from a yellow source, a magenta source, and a greenish cyan source. So I'm gonna make the yellow a little brighter, so the scene is more yellow lit, a little more magenta, so there's more magenta, as well as a little more cyan, or yeah, a little cyan, just a little bit. Okay, and now for the mid-tones, maybe move it a little red, so this part become more pronounced, a little bit more yellow, and a little bit more magenta. And with saturation, I think we should also tone down the green a little bit. So I'm just gonna move this down. So this now is a little more grayed out. Okay, next we add in a threshold. So a threshold is a black and white image. It makes your image black and white. So this actually looks like a really cool pen render of our 3D scene. So let's switch it until we get some definition, on the edge here and along the bricks and like that. And now let's make it multiply. Well, you can't really see much, but if we change this a little down, you'll see that the part has now becomes a lot more black. So we just want a little bit in our scene, just a little bit. So let's make it 10. Oh. So now we have like the most black part being absolutely black, and now we can just fill it to 40. Okay, and now let's make a comparison between our view and the final Photoshop. So it definitely looks a lot better after Photoshopping. Our definitions in the composition is now a lot more clear. The lights are affecting the scene a lot more, as well as adding a lot more contrast to our surfaces, such as here. Now, before it looked really flat, and now we get a lot more details all around. And lastly, you can add a curve. If you want this image to look like a film, you can just move this corner here a little higher, so you get that really grayed out kind of foggy look. That's some of the effect that they come with the film cameras. As well as you can also go here, move the green up a little, so you get that greenish overall look. And if you want, you can also add a little blue, so it becomes cyan, and then you get that that little bit of a fog. So the absolutely black parts gets a little bit of a shade, so the contrast is lessened. And like here, so now there's less contrast, and you can see more details, and the whole image becomes a lot more softer. So you can do however you want. For me, I think I'm just going to keep it off, so I get this really nice contrasty look. Or if I do, I'll probably take out the green, because there's too much green. See, and I'll probably just lower this and give it a little fog. So then the contrast is softer, but without making the scene too bright. Okay, so now I'm going to just save over a file that I made earlier, chapter 24:1, and okay. Okay, now that the image is saved, the PSD is saved, we can save also a JPEG. I'm just gonna cover it up, and now we can open up the JPEG, and this is the same scene here. And with the JPEG, you can now go and add some sharpen. I like to add a little bit of a sharpen to the scene. I don't know if you can see in the recording, but the edge has become a little bit sharper, especially on like the clothing on the inside. Let's zoom in a little further. So now you can see that it has become a little sharper with a little bit of a noise, so it has that film look. Now if you do a little more sharpen, then you'll get more noise, but it's a little bit of overkill. Although if you do zoom out, it becomes more obvious. So yeah, it depends on what you want to go for. For me, I would just add a little bit of a sharpen. Okay, so our resolution is 16:9, or the HD dimension of 16:9. And a lot of film shots are in the format of 21:9, so you get that really wide format. So here we'll be reproducing that. So double click on the image here so it becomes a layer, and go to crop, and with this selected, we'll change the 16 to 21. and just click your image, and then you can drag it however you want. So I'm just going to drag it here. So this is in the middle of this 1/3 area, and I'm going to click anywhere. Okay, so now you have a shot that is 16:9. And if you want to add the black border on the top and bottom, just create a new layer. And when you create a new layer, go to Canvas and make this just a random big number, 80. And now change this to black. Color this in black, and we go back to crop, select 16:9, and just click any of the icons here. And now you'll have a cut 21:9 image, and it'll have that really movie kind of look to it. Okay, so this is for the first shot. Now we'll move on to the second shot. Now it's a little different for the second shot because for the first one, it's mostly environment lighting. And the second one, we'll be more focusing on the character and the key light and the fill light and the balance of that. Okay, now let's take a look at the second shot. So we're going to zoom out a little so we see the entire picture. And for this shot, we want to have the composition of the top right corner being lit and the rest being mostly dark so that we can show the character inside the machine more clearly. And at the same time, we want to have more of a contrast between the back of the character, this light on her, as well as to contrast this from the background so the character stands out a little bit more. Okay, and so yeah, we can begin with the EXR file. Okay, with the EXR file opened, we're gonna do the same thing of going to the mode and just change this to a 16-bit image. So now we have all the glorious details available, and we will go into curves to try to reduce this down again to almost what we have on the PNG. So I'm also going to bring in the PNG. And now we will do this. Okay, when the lightness and dark is roughly there, let's go to hue and just decrease the hue so we get more of a definition. So these two are almost the same. I think this needs to be a little darker. Okay, and yep, they're almost the same now, just with a lot more detail in the back. Okay, and with this selected, we can I think I'm going to apply a bit of the PNG to this because this gives us too much of these details which make the whole image look a little dirty. So I'm gonna take this, add a mask to it, and make it black. And now take a white brush to brush in some of the PNG. So we want some of the PNG look for the face because it has that nice soft skin looking detail, as well as the image. Actually, most of the character on the inside, I would add some of the PNG layer to it. Yeah, the glass, when it hits the light, we can leave that. So you have that kind of dirty fingerprint look. But for the skin, we want to have it mostly clean. Okay, so now we have added in some of the PNG, and now the inside looks a little better. We can also, add the PNG to a bit of the background here, because here the detail is a little bit overwhelming. So we can just lessen that with our PNG layer also on top. As well as the character in the front. We can add in a bit of the PNG to the skirt, just a little bit. And for the back as well, because right now the back is looking really, really bright. So let's just brush in a bit of the PNG in the background. Okay, so let's take a look. Now it looks a little better. It's looking a lot more softer now. And before we do anything, let's fix a little bit of the image. We can first go here and just let me see. We can add it to here, create a new layer, and let's go and use the clone tool. So you can select with Alt and just brush in that, so it will copy or stamp what you have just copied onto the brush. So we can clean up a little bit of the hair here. So now it's looking good. As well as we want to clean up a little bit of her head. I think the glass is doing it major injustice, but I think we have to go to this layer because the PNG is on top. It's a little hard. So you have to do it slowly. So I'm stamping out a bit of the face, or else it looks like her face that's dirty instead of the glass that's dirty. So I'm just gonna take some of that out. Or if you want, you can also just take this portion and just re-render it without the glass. So you can have that as a new layer and just place it on top of this image. But I'm not going to do that because it's going to take a lot of time. But you can do that if you wish. Okay, so now we fix that and we fix the hair. Let's go on to the curves, and same as before, let's start adding in the shadow first for this time. So I'm going to click on an area so it darkens the entire scene. Still trying to find that area. Okay, so don't worry if it takes a while. I think this is great. Okay, now we can start adding some mask to it. For example, we want this part to be bright, so let's paint in some black. Okay. So now this part is relatively light. And also just a bit on the outside. And a little bit here. And most importantly, now let's use a smaller brush